Absolutely. But joining us now in the Element Wealth studios is the Attorney General of the great state of Mississippi, Lynn Fitch. General, thanks for coming on this morning.
Gerard, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and first, hotty-totty. Right?
Hotty-totty. Big time, big win for the national champs of Ole Miss for winning the Baseball College World Series.
We do a lot of things great in Mississippi, and we should, of course, recognize Mississippi State being the national champion last year, and Southern Miss is knocking on the door, and I got a feeling Coach Scott Berry down there, he'll have that team there, and they'll come home with that trophy eventually as well. I really do.
I agree with you. Yes, last year coming off a great win by Mississippi State, Hail State.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 years in a row, that speaks volumes for our state.
And we traveled so well and so well represented, and it makes you feel good about how our fans really showcase the best of Mississippi for a national audience, honestly.
It does. Year in and year out, Mississippi fans are so gracious and kind, and we do travel very well and great ambassadors for our state.
No doubt. So we do a lot of good stuff. We play a little baseball as well, and I think we've proven that. We wanted you to come in here today, and we appreciate you taking some time to do so. We haven't visited since the Dobbs case ruling was handed down last Friday. We're less than a week ago. Tomorrow will be a week anniversary of that. But, wow, that has taken the nation by storm. It has put Mississippi in focus, and you and your office in particular, with respect to the case and the ruling. The leak, I think, was no surprise in terms of the draft opinion, I should say, of the leak of the draft opinion. That was an indicator, and it turns out that's what happened. It's still not a good thing that there was a leak at the Supreme Court. That's just not appropriate, not proper for the way our highest court in the land should operate. Nonetheless, we got a decision, and you got to be feeling pretty good about that.
Oh, it's a historic, monumental time for us. Certainly the leak was appalling, that you would test the integrity of the United States Supreme Court. But when we did see that leak, we had such great hope, which proved exactly what this opinion came out to reflect.
Yeah.
And again, this is a whole new day. 50 years later, we're turning the page on Roe v. Wade, an incredible opportunity for our state, our country. And as you looked at it, it's certainly a victory for women, a victory for children, and a victory for our court. I'd like to really commend our court for restoring constitutional principles. And they saw this was such a critical issue that and held it in high regard to return this issue to the respective states. And I think that's so important, too, that now states can make that decision in these policies, and people have a voice in those policies.
Yeah, agree. And that really was at the heart of the decision. And it seems to have been the decision, I think, to some extent, has kind of been the focus has been on both sides of the argument that this is really about abortion, but it was really about abortion in the context of whether or not that is a constitutional right. And we should be clear about that. I mean, that was at the heart of the case and the decision itself. And so we've got, it's kind of interesting, we've got strong responses from both camps, and we're seeing, we were talking about it earlier on the show, lots of creative response coming out of the left that's just bound and determined to really make abortion on demand something that is widely available in this country and available everywhere. And we've got the red states, such as Mississippi, that are busy implementing law, enacting law, trigger laws. We'll get to that in a second, to restrict or prohibit abortion. We got the blue states that are opening up even further, and they're busy doing that. So it's just another one of those issues where I think the states are bifurcated to some extent. This is one of those issues. So we've got the clinic here in Jackson, right, that has filed a suit in light of the trigger law. So tell us the sequence exactly, Attorney General, of what happened. We get the ruling. Then we have the trigger law. I believe you sent a letter, right, to the clinic, if I'm not mistaken.
I did. And, to your point, Gerard, this was a crystal clear decision. The court did not hold back. The court clearly said that the Constitution does not confer a right for abortion and should be returned to the states. It was very clear. Justice Alito very specifically laid everything out, talked about precedents, talked about overturning precedents, so very specific on what why this was an issue that should be returned to the states. And so as it was returned to the states, we have a trigger law that's in effect. So my responsibility, once I knew that we had the decision was received and it clearly stated that Roe v. Wade and Casey were overturned, my responsibility was to review that decision and then let people know that we had a trigger law to go into effect. And I did. After a very complex, very thorough analysis, we released our certification. We filed with the Secretary of State as set out by the law. And then I also sent a letter to the Jackson Women's Healthcare Organization saying the trigger law has now been in effect, and be mindful of the duties and laws and responsibilities you have as a clinic. The trigger law is to go into effect July the 7th. That will be the 10 days.
All right, so they have filed a suit, right, with respect to that. And so tell us about that against the state.
They
right.
did. You know, and it's been anticipated, and we've seen that across the country. Many of the other states that also had trigger laws that went into effect, you had the other side opposing and filing suits. And the anticipation is that if you file these suits, they will stay. They will allow the abortions to continue. That is kind of the model for them. So, yes, we have received their suit. It was filed in Chancery Court of Hinds County. All 4 of the chancellors recused themselves from hearing this case. It is now with Chief Justice of the Mississippi Supreme Court to assign a chancellor to hear this case, and then certainly we'll be moving it as quickly as we can to the Mississippi Supreme Court.
What does that mean in terms of the availability of the abortion procedure in light of the case being filed by Jackson Women's Health Organization?
Well, currently everything would stay in effect through July the 7th because the trigger law would not go into effect until then. Okay. We're hopeful that we can get a very expedient time to be in front of the court, hopefully prior to the July 7th timeline, so that it would stay in effect completely. But again, it could very well be put into a stayed position if the court sees fit to do that.
Okay. All right. So, and I think there are similar suits filed in other states as well in response to trigger laws that went into effect, if I'm not mistaken, by organizations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
And that was expected, right?
We did. We assumed that they would do that. Again, this is an overturning of 50 years, and so that they were ready on the other side to do that. And you've had, like I said, a number of states that have trigger laws. They have already had the same type of lawsuits filed just as we have.
Yeah.
But we have very strong laws. Our trigger law is very good. We were very specific and very methodical about how we released our certification, all done correctly and within the legal process.
It seems to me like, General, that this is fairly straightforward. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer, but without being a lawyer, it seems like, okay, if the Supreme Court says this is a matter to be decided at the state level and the state makes that decision, I don't see how the plaintiff here has much of a leg to stand on. What am I missing there?
Well, you're really not. Again, it's just another tactic to throw in some fear-mongering, again, to make sure that this stays for as many days or weeks as they possibly can get that to allow it to be happening. So, again, it was highly anticipated. We're ready. Our state's prepared, and we're just going to continue through this legal process, and hopefully we'll get a chancellor assigned here very quickly.
This morning, President Biden is calling for, I'm sure you've seen this, an end to the filibuster in order to codify Roe v. Wade. And we've been talking about that some on the program today. Are you surprised at that he reacted that way? I mean, he's still in Europe, I believe. He stops and makes this announcement, why he thought he had to do that from Europe. I mean, to me, that shows that this is really a big political issue to the Democrats.
Oh, no question it is. You know, and he didn't come down strong enough originally, so you saw a number of members of his party that insisted that he take much stronger action, which I think hence is why he started today in this. You know, we've seen so much overreach from the Biden administration. Again, we'll be ready to fight back and sustain this decision that's come down from the United States Supreme Court on Roe v. Wade being overturned. We
got a break right here. I know you're going to stay with us through the break for another segment. And when we come back, wanted to talk to you a little bit about your official statement, which your office released, and get your ideas on some of the things you said there.
Great.
Appreciate that. Attorney General Lynn Fitch is in the Element Wealth studios. We'll take a break and be right back. Studios, we've got Attorney General Lynn Fitch is our guest. We're just talking about the Dobbs case and the big victory there. And General... you've become more than just our Attorney General. You have become thrust into the limelight. I've seen you on a number of the news shows because you're at the heart of what happened here, and your office is in the state of Mississippi. And Dr. Dobbs, his name is forever in infamy, right? That's kind of crazy that, his name is attached to that. But everybody knows, the parties in the case, I think now, they know it front and center for sure. That's just been thrust into the limelight. But you issued a press release on the day, just within hours or so, or less than hours after the ruling was handed down. And if it's okay, General, I'm just going to read one paragraph in here about, where do we go? This really talks about where do we go from here. You say, we must renew our commitment to weaving a safety net that helps women in challenging circumstances and gives their children life and hope. This is about more than the fundamentals of prenatal vitamins and diapers. It is about helping to connect them to opportunities for education and job training to support their families. And as always, it's about love and respect for them through whatever struggles they face. This is what it means to both empower women and promote life. So that's profound statement there. Where do we go from here? What do we need to do? What do our lawmakers need to hear from your perspective on this?
Well, it's an important message. And even as we put in our brief and as we made our oral argument, we really had to have the first holistic discussion about empowering women and promoting life. And then how do we go about that? Because they work together. You don't have to choose like you did 50 years ago. It's not an either or. But as we looked at the most vulnerable, how could we help those women? What could we do to support them? Certainly, we need to be ready to help the pregnancy centers with resources and tools. And like I said, beyond just vitamins and diapers, we need to upskill these individuals. We need to help them in whatever situation that they're in. Some are in abusive relationships. Some don't have a safety network. So we've really got to strengthen the entire network across our state that would support these women, these children. That's going to be key. We've got over 30 pregnancy centers across the state, again, to provide support, resources on every level, just beyond just the material things that we could be providing. That's going to be key. Now, we've got to have some very hard discussions and then move into some action on these other topics. Like we need to talk about how we provide affordable and accessible child care. That needs to happen for everyone across the state of Mississippi, but it's certainly uplifting for the women. That's going to be key as we address that. It's also going to be key that we stop and talk about enforcement of child support for these women, because for far too long, women have borne the majority of the financial hardships for the children. And fathers should be at least equally responsible. That has not been the case, and I think that's going to be a key driver to change those dynamics. We need to talk about workplace flexibility, options in the workplace, such as more maternity and paternity leave. Again, very important discussion as we move forward. And then we've got to talk about the adoption system. We've got to talk about how we streamline that system. We've also got to look very carefully at our foster care system. Again, very important as we think about these children. And as they go into foster care or they go to families that want to adopt them, because these are loving individuals who are ready to be connected with these children, and these babies can thrive. We've got to make sure that that system works. And for far too long, it's been broken. And again, these are discussion, and now we move into action. We asked the court to allow us to have this back to the states. They've now granted it. And it's our job, our responsibility to move forward, with just great compassion, just like we had compassion to overturn Roe v. Wade. Now we need to move forward with compassion on all these action items to empower women and promote life. Yeah, so one of the things that we see out of the left is they say, well, the problem with respect to you folks on the right, you anti-choice people, you pro-life people, is that you really don't want to help the mothers and then the children once they give birth to these children. And that's one of the issues that they face, and they decide that an abortion is the best route. But they seem to come out of the woodwork on that. The other thing I hear is that, there are just not enough families that are looking to adopt a child.
that there's not enough supply of that. But I hear from the adoption community that it's just the opposite. So what's the truth there, or do you know anything about that?
Well, certainly. There are so many loving families out there that are ready to adopt. We have such hard processes in place. It's tough to make that connectivity. So we have to do a better job of streamlining. And we need to look at best practices. What other states are doing it better? How are they doing it? How are we able to go in and get these most vulnerable little babies and connect them with great, loving families? Yeah. Again, what's the connector for the foster care? Are we putting these children in excellent foster care so that we can then get them to their adopted parents? It should never be taking years and years and years to make this happen. So I think we have some work to be done. Okay. I think we're ready for the challenge. It's going to be hard work, but as we drive toward these solutions and we look to put them in place as quickly as possible, I think it's such a win-win for the children. It's a win-win for those parents that are eager to have that baby in their home or that child.
And you make a good point about the counseling centers. They've saved countless lives when desperate women who are pregnant look for what to do. They're maybe on the fence about, do I abort this baby or do I carry it to term? And if I do, what does that mean to my life, the life of the baby? And these folks do a heck of a job of working with those pregnant women to help them make the decision to carry their baby, to have their baby, and then to take care of them. But I think what I'm hearing you say is we got to go further than that. And the state's got to get involved in this as well as to cut some of the red tape out of the adoption process. Is that accurate?
We do. We need to look at best practices. How do we make that connection very quickly for these children, these babies, to get to those families? For too long, we have lengthy processes, and certainly a termination of parental rights is an issue. But when we know this is happening, we need to be prepared and have those processes in place and ready to go as expeditiously as possible.
Have you talked to members of the legislature, state leaders, the governor, lieutenant governor? What have they had any discussions with you about this?
We are having some discussions. We are putting together packets of information so we can all look at it from a whole strategic perspective, as we should, because not one thing is going to work, Gerard. We've got to look at all these different avenues that empower women and then actually promote life at the same time and find that place for that child if they're going into an adopted home. So we have to look at it all together and make sure it's all moving very well along the lines with each different respective issue that we're facing.
I think the key takeaway for me, General, is that you've said so articulately was, hey, we wanted the Supreme Court to rule to return this to the states. They've done that. Now we got to go to work. It's not over. I think that's the point.
You're exactly. The real work starts now. We worked very compassionately to have this decision come about, and they did just that. They returned it to the states. So now it's on all of us. And, as you have a voice, you've elected your legislative members. Yeah. If they're not moving forward on this and you're not pleased with the action or lack thereof action, you can remove them, where before you couldn't, and now you can. You know that your voice, your policies should be first and foremost for these legislative members. Yeah, with Roe in place, you were handcuffed in the issue, on this issue in particular. You couldn't do anything about it. So I think the calling is now to the legislature and our state leaders to take some action. And I guess as a citizen, I'd like to see your office and them work together to address this issue. We got what we wanted. We got what we wanted. Now we got to go to work. We do, and I've seen some action already come out from Lieutenant Governor. He has set up a committee to study. We'll certainly be working hand in hand with them as well, because so many legislative actions need to occur. We do need to make some immediate changes in our law. We need to add some new laws. We need to be working with our different agencies, because there are some policies and administrative rules and regulations that need to be changed. Yeah. So they all kind of flow together. So I'm excited about it. Again, we ask for the job, and in Mississippi, we're ready for the job. Yeah, that's great. We got to get you on again. We're out of time today to talk about how this might impact the private sector. I know you've seen lots of response out of corporate America on how they're going to deal with this and what that might mean as far as their operations in a state such as Mississippi that may totally prohibit abortion with our trigger law going into effect. So, so this is not done. That's the point. We got a lot more to do, a lot more to talk about. We appreciate you coming on and discussing that with us, Attorney General Lynn Fitch. Thank you. Always good to see you. Great to see you. Thank you for having me today.
We'll be right back here in the Element